This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, globally, we saw currencies and stocks falling broadly today as investors grapple with the potential economic impact of the spreading coronavirus outbreak. South Africa's JSE fell over 2% on the day to its lowest level in 6 weeks. That, of course, is a level last not seen since December. Industrials were down almost 2% today and banks slipped over 1%. Retail firm Woolworths did announce a 3.8% rise in group sales in the 26 weeks ending December 29th. But even that news didn't impact its share price today. That was down about 1.07%. Now, also coming up on the show. The deadly coronavirus rattles the markets across the globe as investors seek safe haven assets. The UK plans to announce whether to ban equipment made by tech giant Huawei from its 5G networks. And Madagascar farmers tap into the growing market of animal-enhanced coffee. Now, the death toll from the novel coronavirus pneumonia stands at 81 now. Nearly 3,000 cases have been confirmed globally, the vast majority in China. Now, Tibet is the only region in the country without any cases so far. Around half of the confirmed cases are at ground zero in Wuhan, which is the capital of central China's Hubei province. More than 30,000 people across China are under medical observation after having close contact with confirmed patients. There are 42 confirmed cases outside China. Thailand has 8. The United States and Australia each have 5. Cambodia has just confirmed its first case. And in Africa, authorities in Cote d'Ivoire are now testing a first suspected case and expect results on Wednesday. Now, of course, as we mentioned earlier, the coronavirus is affecting global stock markets as investors are seeking safe haven assets such as the Japanese yen or U.S. Treasury notes. The MSCI All Country World Index closed down 0.4% last Friday to a 2-week low. Mining companies were a main drag due to their exposure to China. Meanwhile, the U.S. S&P 500 also posted losses, while its mini futures index was trading down 0.9% in early Asian trade on Monday. Japan's Nikkei 225 today suffered its biggest one-day fall in 5 months with a 2% loss. In other developments, U.S. Treasury prices are pushing down those yields, while the Japanese yen and gold prices both rose to their highest level in over 2 weeks. Now, of course, the outbreak of coronavirus is impacting Africa's key tourism markets for Chinese tourists. Let's get more insight from one of those big markets. We're joined now by CGTN's Daniel Plafka. He joins us in Port Louis, Mauritius. Great to have you on the show, Daniel. Now, the Health and Wellness Ministry there has now issued a travel advice. It basically says that all passengers, irrespective of their nationality, traveling from affected cities in China will be immediately quarantined going forward. So, Daniel, paint us a picture of the response you have seen on ground so far.
Uche, great to be with you here on the program. The response has been firm. The mood here on the ground in Mauritius is one that I would describe as cautious but confident. You're quite right that those effects are now in place, mandating quarantine for all recent arrivals from severely affected Chinese provinces and cities. Those measures have been in place since Saturday, and they are largely gaining the support of those involved in the tourism industry here. Of course, concerns do remain, Uche, that the restrictions may dampen one of the country's most important economic sectors, that is, of course, tourism.
And of course, Daniel, Mauritius had become one of the top destinations for China's massive tourist market. So how many cancellations have we seen so far from Mauritius tourist industry, especially as a result of this virus outbreak?
Uche, you're absolutely right that tourism does represent a critical plank in the Mauritian economy. We have to remember we're talking about a country here that is relatively geographically isolated, of course, and has one of the smallest populations anywhere in Africa. So foreign visitors and the capital that they bring with them has been very important historically and today to the island's economic development. Now, having said that, while Chinese visitors do represent a small but significant minority, they are nowhere close to the numbers coming from other parts of the world. The majority of visitors, of course, coming to Mauritius still from European markets. That remains the traditional base. But of the 1.3 million visitors who visit the island annually, Chinese tourists represent roughly 6%. So it's not altogether insignificant. And you alluded to cancellations, Uche. Cancellations certainly have been happening. Just today, we spoke to one tour operator who's told us about new regulations coming into effect as soon as tomorrow that will effectively ban all outbound organized group tours to the island of Mauritius from China beginning on the 28th. Now, those regulations coming from the authorities in Beijing aimed at curtailing the spread of the virus overseas. In the case of those businesses that do rely on Chinese tourism for the bulk of their business, they will be affected quite severely. We spoke to one firm today telling us the cancellations have certainly been on the rise. People who intended to come to the island here choosing not to come, and of course those who are here, some deciding to extend their trip as the outbreak continues to play out across the mainland. But many tour operators who rely on the traditional markets, France, England, Germany, other European origins, they are largely, for the time being at least, still riding things out, largely unaffected at this time.
Well, Daniel, give us a sense or give us a bigger picture of how important Mauritius is as a tourist destination, especially for Chinese travelers.
It's a very important destination. It experienced steady gain in terms of the number of visitors coming from mainland China. Traditionally, as we know, tourism from China tending to be a group affair. Many of those especially coming to destinations that may be considered more adventurous to the average Chinese traveler, opting to travel in large organized groups. In recent years, though, Uche, that trend has started to shift a bit. More and more individuals seeking to chart their own path, coming to places like this on their own. That's the kind of travel that may continue in the weeks and months ahead. But as we've said, as people continue to stay home, as minds continue to turn inwards, people thinking, of course, of their loved ones affected by this tragic outbreak back in the PRC, many folks putting travel a little bit lower on the priority list. It is important to mention the mood on the ground, talking to people involved in the tourism industry, people who work in hotels, people who work in marketplaces and popular attractions. Many of them, interestingly enough, pointing their concern in some of the new infections that have emerged in Europe. France now reporting confirmed cases in the single digits. A lot of the folks that we talk to who don't deal so much with the Chinese side of the business, Uche, they're concerned a little bit of where the virus could go next. Largely, however, a lot of confidence, a lot of wary faith in the government's ability to contain the risk and keep the threat of the novel coronavirus outbreak at bay.
Quite right. Well, many thanks for your insights there, Daniel. Of course, that's Daniel Plafka joining us in Port Louis, Mauritius. Now, meanwhile, the Chinese government has announced a 3-day extension to the nation's annual Spring Festival holiday. The extension comes as part of a series of contingency policies which will regulate holiday travel and help contain the spread of the coronavirus. Travel agencies are also cancelling tour groups and issuing refunds. CGTN reporter Mai Kay has more on that story.
The Chinese State Council has announced a 3-day extension to the annual holiday amid national efforts to contain the coronavirus outbreak. This comes after major cities all over the country launched their own contingency plans to limit in- and outbound traffic. Travel agencies are also on the move. Many have volunteered to compensate for trip cancellation. Industry giant Trip.com has cancelled about 1/5 of all trips scheduled for the holiday.
We will cancel all domestic orders for free. We also have new policies for cancelling group and individual trips to foreign destinations like Japan, South Korea, Thailand, and the Maldives. We have set aside 200 million yuan as contingency budget. For the losses of airlines, hotels, and local tour guides, we'll use the contingency budget to compensate. Other companies in the business are also doing the same.
In the Chinese capital of Beijing, many tourist sites have cancelled celebration activities. I'm here on a street connecting two of Beijing's busiest tourist attractions, the Yonghe Lama Temple and the Earth Altar. Usually during spring festivals, thousands would come to temple fairs and grant their New Year's wishes. But this year, the unexpected outbreak of virus have left tourist sites all over Beijing like this empty. The city of Wuhan, where the outbreak began, stopped processing visa applications effective on Sunday. This will stop residents from traveling to foreign countries, China's Hong Kong, Macau or Taiwan. Ma Ke for CGTN in Beijing.
Now, this virus outbreak is forcing many countries to stop wild animal trade. In Indonesia, the government has been trying to enforce strict regulations in order to stop the practice. But as CGTN Silkina Al-Hulwalia now reports, it's not that easy. Some viewers may find this content disturbing.
Snakes, rats, and bats. Some people might call them scary, but in North Sulawesi, it's lunch. Tomohon Extreme Market has been around for years, and it's currently the epicenter of Indonesia's exotic meat trades, including cats and dogs.
We're just about to enter the Extreme Market. To be honest with you, I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know what to expect. I think the first thing that hits you right off the bat, even right here, is the smell. It smells really pungent, really strong. And I think it's because, you know, this market has everything from bats and snakes and cats and dogs. Right off the bat, we can see dogs right here on my right.
For Yeri, this is just a typical day at work. He's been a vendor at the market for nearly 20 years.
My customers know where to find me. This is where I earn my money.
And just like Yeri, for many vendors here, it's business as usual. However, exotic animals are currently being heavily regulated in the country. Dogs and cats, for example, are not defined as food because they're not a product of farming. But many of the locals here refuse to budge, all in the name of tradition.
We have been eating this since our grandparents' generation.
Experts believe this is a breeding ground for zoonotic diseases and rabies transmission. Frank Manus is an activist from Animal Friends Manado, Indonesia, an organization that has been campaigning for the closure of the extreme market.
We are now in the middle of a serious health problem, the coronavirus outbreak. Even though that's in China, we have the same concern here. The quality of the meat sold at the market is not hygienic. It is unclear where the animals are sourced from.
Frank believes the government needs to reinforce strict regulations to prevent the spread of diseases. And trading for both bushmeat and domestic animals should carry heavy penalties. Silkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Manado.
Well, now let's shift focus to our corporate headlines today. Global Energy and Chemicals Group Sasol has finally been approved for a secondary listing on the South African Stock Exchange, the A2X markets. Now, Sasol's ordinary shares will be tradable on the new exchange from early next month. The listing will bring the total number of securities on the stock exchange to 34, with a combined market capitalization of over $137 billion. And clothing retailer Woolworths says its half-year earnings could drop by as much as 20%. Woolworths tends to be more shielded from South Africa's tough economic environment compared to its peers. This is because the retailer targets higher income customers. However, Woolworths now says a number of factors hurt its trade over the critical December period. And talks to salvage the tentative $1.7 billion debt restructuring between Congo and energy traders Glencore and Trafigura are stalling. This is set to jeopardize an International Monetary Fund bailout for the debt-hobbled nation. Last July, the IMF signed off a $449 million lending program to help Congo's ailing economy. However, only $45 million has been dispersed so far as the international financier waits for the Central African nation to finalize a deal with the traders. And finally, Ethiopia's corporate plans are in high gear as the government releases the privatization timelines of its state corporations. Under the plan, Ethiopia is set to first sell 6 of its sugar monopoly holdings as the country pushes to deal with dwindling exports and growing foreign debt. At least 10 countries have so far made a bid for the sugar assets, with the first sale expected in June this year. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come. Zimbabwe turns to the UAE for plans to boost its economy. And around 1,000 more retrenchments hit South Africa's iron and steel industries.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's turn our attention to Zimbabwe now. The government is looking to the United Arab Emirates in a bid to sell a stake in the National Oil Infrastructure Company of Zimbabwe. Now, the country is grappling with a rapid decline in economic growth after it contracted by more than 6% in 2019. Zimbabwe hopes to secure investments that will help spur economic growth as its inflation soars past 500%. Now, the country's currency has also depreciated by more than 90% against the dollar since the abolishment of the 1-to-1 peg in February 2019. And still in Zimbabwe, the country's second largest city, Bulawayo, is experiencing a severe water shortage, and that's partly due to a drought that hit the country last year. Water levels at dams in the city have dropped drastically, forcing residents to walk for long distances in search of the scarce resource. CGTN's Beryl Oro has more.
These are the scenes that greet you when you get to Zimbabwe's Bulawayo city. Most residents have been forced to go for days without running water. For Abraham Kavalanjila and his two sons, the hope that water supply will resume has been dwindling by the day. They, like many other residents in this area, have been forced to fetch water from an open well.
We have no option. Yeah, this water is dangerous. As you can see, just check. Someone did his rubbish here. There's nothing that we can do, you see. Yeah.
But you still have...
we still have to, because we need some water to use at home.
This is the water that we use, but we have to boil it first so that we can drink it. We boil the water so that we can purify it from germs, and we are able to use it for drinking and cooking.
Bulawayo City has decommissioned 2 of the water supply dams after water fell below pumping levels. The crisis has further forced authorities to ration the already scarce resource.
It's been a while. I think it's since last year. Because they ended up introducing, council ended up introducing 96 hours water shedding. Now we have got a problem.
It is frustrating because if the water is not there, you have to buy. I don't know how much 5 liters of water costs now, because I think it's another expense on my side. It's quite costly.
Authorities say Bulawayo's long-term solution lies in the construction of a new dam.
Actually, we're projecting that in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we might lose the 3rd dam, which is Lower Nyama. It's currently sitting just above 10% in terms of capacity. And we have also put together a paper to government for us to be declared as a water shortage area.
Zimbabwe, which is grappling with an economic crisis, is one of the Southern African nations experiencing the worst drought in years. This as climate change wreaks havoc in a country already struggling to cope with extreme natural disasters. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, let's move on now. Water hyacinth remains quite a tenacious weed in various African nations. For instance, here in Kenya, the invasive plant has for years choked off a large part of the East African economy's Lake Victoria. Well, CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy now explores how farmers in the western region of Kenya are now turning that problem into a valuable resource.
Farmers in Kenya's Siaya County have found a way to turn the intrusive water hyacinth weed into manure in a bid to help stop spread of the weed and also boost soil fertility in farms. The farmers are all members of a community-based organization known as Asembo Odala Rieko that promotes farming conservation and other development projects in the area. Every month, they spend several hours harvesting water hyacinth along the shores of Lake Victoria.
We use the dry stock, then made from maize or any plant material. Then we cover it with, we also put the layer of dry grass. Then we put the layer of a heap of the water hyacinth. Then we cover with the topsoil, which will aid the decomposition, and then we sprinkle wood ash, and the wood ash acts as a base to neutralize the acidity, and then we sprinkle water, and the water will help in making a moist environment in the soil. Then we repeat like that to the level we want.
Water hyacinth has choked off large parts of Lake Victoria, the world's second largest freshwater lake that straddles Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. The weed has alarmed environmentalists with its spread over the years. Margaret Odola works at the demonstration farm and also uses the manure to grow vegetables on her plot at home.
Water hyacinth is a blessing to us. We use it for mulching, we use its mud for direct, manure, and we use its real leaves for making compost manure.
Hyacinth can also be used as mulch in farms to help retain moisture in the soil. According to a report by Agriculture for Impact, soil degradation affects about 180 million people in sub-Saharan Africa alone, costing them around $68 billion per year. Farmers are now being encouraged to boost their use of organic manure in farms to help improve the quality of soils. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Well, let's head to South Africa now. The country's iron and steel industry is under immense pressure. This comes after ArcelorMittal announced it has finalized the retrenchment of about 1,000 workers at its Saldanha operations in the Western Cape. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more on that story.
The retrenchments have been in the pipeline for some time now, with the country's Trade and Industry Minister, Ibrahim Patel, trying to convince the company to sell the export-oriented Saldanha steel operation in an attempt to salvage those jobs.
When you look at the situation realistically, it was impossible that AMSA were going to sell out to a competitor. Also, the market structure in which we have and the way in which they are protected means that they are able to dictate prices, able to dictate supply. So I don't think that they would have given up anything to try and diminish their market share in the steel industry itself.
The sector is reeling following another announcement from AMSA, the primary steel manufacturer, on Sunday.
Two trade unions yesterday from AMSA that they are shedding another 400 positions at their Newcastle plant and the Vereniging plant. Main reasons being that they're relooking their footprint, optimizing the plants. We were expecting this. They've shared an indication early or late last year that they will go through all their plants and optimize.
While these job losses are directly attributable to AMSA, the players are also suffering retrenching in 2019, and downstream value chain impacts will be severe too.
A lot of the positions at Tridents, the Max deals, etc., a lot of positions were shed there as well. The figures I'm not sure of now, but there's a lot of jobs being shed downstream as well.
The DA is calling for government to remove some of the safeguard duties that protect AMSA from local competition.
We need to make sure that where there's capital expenditure that AMSA have committed to, that the ministry holds them to account and make sure that they spend that money to upgrade their plants and obviously make their operation more competitive.
One of the steel industry associations says that the steel and manufacturing sectors need urgent interventions, not long-term plans.
We have the designation requirements. That is somewhere where we think there's a quick win for industries, because government procurement is big business. It's about 983 billion rands that's been spent annually on procurement. So we think if we enforce designation, it's going to help local industry.
This latest round of job shedding or retrenchments doesn't augur well for the iron and steel and manufacturing sector. In fact, it could be the death knell. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Centurion, South Africa.
And still in South Africa, stakeholders in the country's horse racing and breeding industries have now welcomed the upcoming EU audit on bloodstock export protocols. Now, the move could see the ban lifted on horses which are being exported into that market after they were prohibited from entering the EU back in 2011. Now, the ban was due to an outbreak of African horse sickness. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with more.
South African thoroughbred horses are prized overseas not only for their winning bloodlines, but also their prices, with top bloodstock costing just 1/10 of what they go for in Australia. But the EU ban has placed major pressure on local breeders to invest further costs in quarantine facilities which go via Mauritius. But that could all change quite soon.
The export protocols have been in place for a long time.
The problem is that last time we were audited, we failed the audit, and an enormous amount of work has gone into creating systems and processes within South Africa, which gives us the confidence now that we will most certainly pass an EU audit. And the wonderful news is that just recently the trade negotiators from the EU and the trade negotiators from South Africa agreed that an audit will be conducted.
The EU inspectors are headed to these shores for their protocol audit and will review what they term South Africa's shortcomings that led to the ban. Among them was the ability to ensure the absence of African horse sickness in the controlled zone. But South Africa has since sharpened up its response processes.
The EU seems to be the gold standard, and everyone measures and bases their own protocols based on what the EU is doing at that very point in time. And the indications given to us by almost all these racing jurisdictions is that they would certainly follow the EU in opening direct exports from South Africa, which means the East becomes probably the biggest market for South African horses.
While a trade dispute over an EU poultry ban is blamed for the length of the ban, there remains a lot of interest in local equine that can be shipped overseas in a short amount of time. For many South African horse exporters, the audit cannot come sooner enough because not only have quarantine costs over here made it a costly affair, but quarantine costs in Mauritius have compounded the issue. That's because restrictions have seen them take additional quarantine time via the Indian Ocean. But the market is beginning to react favorably to the audit news. And not only are horses fetching good prices, but there's now a marked increase in the interest from a host of overseas buyers. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a quick break, but coming up. The UK plans to announce whether to ban equipment made by tech giant Huawei from its 5G networks. And migrants in the UK are increasingly concerned about their future post-Brexit.
Holding guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. At just about 1:30, let's recap today's top headlines. Libya's eastern-based LNA forces have confirmed that a military approach is the viable solution to end the country's conflict. Now, this comes as the LNA announced an attack against militias in Al-Haisha city. The LNA says their attack is preemptive and is not considered a breach to the latest ceasefire. Meanwhile, the African Union has faced many challenges in 2019 as conflicts old and new continue to evolve across the continent. While the organization is currently meeting for its 33rd session in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Under the slogan, "Silencing the Guns," now leaders are gathered in an effort to support Africa's ongoing peace and security issues. And the death toll from coronavirus pneumonia stands at 81 now. Nearly 3,000 cases have been confirmed globally. The vast majority are in China. Around half of the confirmed cases are at ground zero. That's in Wuhan's capital. More than 30,000 people across China are under medical observation after having close contact with confirmed patients. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has visited Wuhan on behalf of President Xi Jinping. Li heads the new task force, which is designated to coordinate efforts to combat the outbreak. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, the UK government is expected to decide whether to ban equipment made by Chinese tech giant Huawei from its 5G networks. The US is now lobbying the UK to exclude it on the grounds of national security. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is chairing a meeting of the National Security Council at which the decision will be made. There is some speculation that Johnson might choose to ban Huawei from the core parts of the networks only. The core carries out essential functions such as authenticating subscribers and sending voice and data between devices. It is also sometimes described as the brains or heart of a network. Now, with millions of EU citizens in the UK, many are worried about what happens to them after Brexit. The government says they need to register online, which is a process that takes a matter of minutes. But some are still fearful of it all and are deliberately leaving it as late as they can. Well, CGTN's Phil Lavelle travelled to rural Wales to meet one woman who is making a stand for now.
BBC Radio Wales Music Day.
Nina's worried.
You just feel really powerless.
Like really worried.
A lot of anxiety.
She's German, has lived in the UK though for the best part of 20 years, most of it in Wales.
I don't think of myself as being different. I'm just a person, and I live somewhere where I really love living.
But now she's scared she's going to be kicked out, a post-Brexit casualty.
There's nothing really I can do. I have to wait for other people to make a decision of what I'm allowed to do or not.
And that is because all foreign EU nationals who've lived here in the UK for 5 years or more now have to formally register their intent, their desire to stay here. If they don't by the deadline, then they face becoming undocumented migrants. As with all things Brexit related, nobody really knows what that will mean in the long term, but one possible outcome is eventual potential deportation. There are 3.4 million EU migrants living in the UK. That is according to the British government. But campaigners say there could be anything up to 1 million more who are not known about. And up to a third may not have yet applied because they are scared of rejection or are confused by the whole process.
It doesn't seem to be such a very straightforward process, and also that we don't get any physical documentation.
Download the ID Document Checker app via an Android phone.
And that's because it's all done online. This app scans a passport and the applicant's face, but many have reported problems in using it.
People are worried about how easy is it going to, to find a job, or because landlords are now required to, to see if somebody is actually legally allowed to live here. All of those problems, and also if we go abroad and come back, do they have it on the system or not? It's just so many questions, and we just, nobody seems to be bothered to answer them.
Now with Brexit Day happening and the deadline for applications to stay on its way, time is quite literally running out. There are no guarantees here.
Yeah, applying for jobs, I'm thinking, is that okay? Because I couldn't even promise my, my employer, oh yeah, of course I can stay, because I don't know.
Home may be where the heart is, but that might not count for much without the official nod to stay.
I don't really have a very positive outlook, but maybe that means that things can only get better if you fear the worst.
Phil Lavelle, CGTN, Llandelo in Wales.
And shifting focus now, as technology advances, digital toys are now starting to dominate toy shelves. In fact, toy manufacturers are now using apps as well as augmented reality to add an extra layer to children's playtime. Let's take a look.
This is Story, a system by Bandai Namco, which combines physical toys with app-based gaming. The system is part of a new trend in which manufacturers are finding new ways to use sophisticated technology in their products. According to the market research company Kids Insights, even in the 3 to 6 year olds category, 10% of girls and 12% of boys in the UK list electronic and digital toys as their favorite things to play with.
Connected play, meaning binding physical play with digital play, is booming. With the new technologies that we are having, we are able now to provide a fluid experience through the physical world and the digital world in a new way and an intuitive way.
Technological advancements allow toy developers to be more accurate and mimic real-life actions better in the digital world. The new generation of tech games don't lag and have thus become more playable. Traditional toy railway sets have had an update as well. The Bulawayo smart tech train is still very much about physical play, yet the simple control panel allows users to make changes to the sounds the toy emits or to drive it backwards and forwards.
I don't think we're changing the traditional, we're basically evolving it, making it to something else. I mean, we are living 2020 now, kids of today, they are definitely into these things, and we want to be part of that, but we want to make it in a real way.
The rise in digital toys is not just about advancements in technology, it's also linked to affordability. Kids Insights surveys more than 100,000 children every year in 3 different continents.
A few years ago, to go and buy a console, you could be a few £100s. It's becoming more expensive now. But with mobile gaming, those barriers to entry aren't there. Children have these devices at a very young age. If it's a tablet, and then by the age of 10, really mobile phone starts to take over. What we're now seeing is that there's no barriers to entry. So we're actually seeing a decrease in console ownership with children.
Toy manufacturers have always looked to new technology in hopes that it will enable them to make the next big craze. Pac-Man, a revolution when it was first unveiled, turns 40 this year, and the iconic character is still used in toys today.
We've always used new technologies in the toy industry when they become a price point that you can put them into a toy and they meet with a consumer's expectation of a toy price.
Even Lego is no longer just about building with bricks. An AR app allows children using some of their products to bring their creations to life and play games with them. The real-life brick-built model appears on screen, but with a whole load of digital effects made possible via the tablet.
We are deeply rooted in the physical experience. Like clicking bricks together, building something will always be there. But I do also think that the interest of kids for digital is not going away.
Even with the new options, toy sales in the UK fell 6% last year, with only low-tech board games and puzzles bucking the trend, rising 1%. So perhaps the digital takeover is still a ways off. Sun Wei, CGTN.
Meanwhile, avid stamp collectors are marking the Lunar New Year by making sure they get their hands on the latest zodiac stamps. On What's Hot Tonight, CGTN's Adiz Tiansan shows us how these businesses are cashing in from Los Angeles.
It's an exciting time for stamp collectors and dealers around the world, as with every Chinese New Year, new stamps of another Chinese zodiac sign come onto the market.
Every year, the post office puts out a new Lunar New Year stamp. It's every year they make a different one, and this one's real ornate. This one shows the actual rat.
The intricate designs of the zodiac animals have proven so popular that they have been marketed in a variety of merchandise. The United Nations also started producing its own line of Chinese New Year themed stamps.
This is called a personalized sheet, and they started issuing these in 2004, basically.
Many collectors come to shows like this to find the missing items in their particular collections.
You start meeting different dealers that collect or that sell different items or countries, and you find the ones that are more able to get the things that you want to buy.
And of course, the price of these stamps can vary significantly depending on how old or rare they are. The most expensive item in this show displays an inverted airplane, printed in error over 100 years ago. That rare quality values it today at $615,000. And although not as rare, certain Chinese New Year stamps have also gained significant value over the years.
And some of those Chinese stamps and booklets that are selling for, $200, $300, $500 or more, the dealers that have been buying China for a long time, they paid under $1 for those. So that's a huge profit.
Among them, the so-called monkey stamp has become famous worldwide.
Usually the Chinese stamp buy the monkey stamp to send back to China. But a lot of Americans love the monkey too because they hear the value going up. They buy for investment too.
It's very hard to predict if and how much value the Chinese New Year stamps could gain over time. But stamp shows like these prove that more collectors are drawn to them than ever before. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Well, let's move on now. Take a look at how commodities performed today. Crude prices extending declines. They dropped below $60 a barrel for the first time in nearly 3 months, as of course the death toll from the coronavirus rose and more businesses were forced to shut down. That stoked the expectation of a slowing in oil demand. Gold, however, jumped 1% to a near 3-week high as investors rushed towards safe haven assets. Let's head into a short break now, still coming up. Madagascar farmers tap into the growing market of animal-enhanced coffee. And a female barber is making waves in Tanzania's city of Dar es Salaam.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, in the rich volcanic soils of central Madagascar's Itassi province, over 1,000 meters above sea level, grows a rare and fragrant coffee. It is coveted by bats and humans alike. But the twist is that humans want it even more after the bats have nibbled on it. Here's more on that report.
Farmers are hard at work harvesting coffee beans in rich volcanic soils of central Madagascar's Itassi province. Bat spit gives a variety of beans a unique smooth flavor, and this is sending the demand for the already expensive specialty Bourbon Pointu coffee soaring to nearly $110 per kilo. Farmers around the world are turning to premium and rare beans, some including an animal touch, to shore up their income amid a global production glut that has driven prices down.
We can live off coffee today. Before it was of no interest to the inhabitants of Itassi, but now it can make a living. If production continues to grow, we can harvest more and more tons.
This premium variety of high-priced Arabica coffee costs more than 50 times the price of commodity-grade coffee. And the reason? A bit of bat spit pushes the price higher. Wild bats chewing on ripe coffee berries result in a reaction between their digestive fluid and outside air, and that gives a unique smooth flavor, according to customers. It's the brainchild of farmer and agricultural entrepreneur Jacques Ramala, and he plans to introduce more farmers to the variety.
Next year, we will ask farmers to focus only on the coffee beans chewed by bats. This means the farmers will harvest only the mature seeds, and that will improve the quality of our harvest.
I'm 24 years old. I'm still a student. My parents are both farmers. Agronomy is my field of study, and it is with coffee that was born the desire to develop this sector, and especially to professionalize it. It is for love for this culture that I started. I am conducting my experiments to draw the quality of this coffee up here in Madagascar.
The farmers produced 2 tons of coffee in 2019 with plans for 20 tons by 2021 for export to discerning markets like Japan. Madagascar's animal-enhanced coffee is not unique. Southeast Asia's Kopi Luwak coffee is made from beans salvaged from civet cat excrement, while Thailand has elephant dung coffee. Extremely high-value coffee is a very niche market and is growing, and the global specialty coffee market is forecast to hit $83.6 billion in 2025. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, female barbers are not a common sight in Africa, but a young lady in Tanzania is an exception. After successfully trying her hand at cutting hair, Christina Msangi was convinced that being a barber was the way to go. She's now set on challenging the status quo and trying to, in quotes, cut it in a male-dominated industry. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Christina Msangi is one of a few female barbers in Tanzania.
Aged 28, she has been cutting male hair professionally for the last 9 years, and in the process, she is slowly changing long-held perceptions of gender roles.
I reject the concept that this is a man's job because I have never believed there is one job for a woman and another for a man.
Initially opposed to the idea of their daughter cutting men's hair, Christina's parents had hoped that she would follow a more conventional path, but living opposite a barber shop in her teenage years helped nurture ambitions of becoming a barber.
Changing gender roles have continued to shape the workplace in many parts of Africa. Women like Christina are inspiring a generation of young people who are continually opting for unconventional jobs.
Christina says that apart from being skilled, self-confidence has been a key factor in her success.
The initial reaction is usually one of shock for people who have never seen a female barber before, but when they see the quality of the work, they're satisfied.
The quality of her work has earned her the respect of her colleagues as well as her boss.
Our barbershop is proud to have Christina because many people don't believe that a woman can cut hair, so when they come here they marvel at how well she can cut hair. So through that it provides us with many ambassadors.
Being female and skilled as a barber has proved advantageous, making her highly sought after by customers.
I am not alone. Here you see me alone, but when I leave here, there are 6 others like me waiting to have their hair cut.
With every stroke of her clippers, Christina aims to shave off old stereotypes and make female barbers a common sight in Africa. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, before we go, let's take a quick look at how Africa's currencies performed today, many of them impacted by the coronavirus. But South Africa's rand did retreat against major currencies as global markets slumped. Investors are taking a backseat as they gauge the effect of the virus on the global economy. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling firmer against the dollar. It was supported by dollar inflows from horticulture exports and offshore investors who are buying government debt. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.